Hi there everybody, lords, ladies, gentlemen, and all the rest of that. It's Nick Dutch back on the camera again one more time. I apologize for the quality, but this is primarily because I'm feeling rather tired. I try to set up the camera with the proper lights in place, and the moment I do that, I go all formal. And I have to actually structure my sentences and actually think harder and all the rest of it. And using this little camera on this mobile phone just seems much more informal and something I could do with much greater ease. I'm just feeling tired right now, so please do forgive me. I've done a fair bit of work. I was out late last night and so on and so forth. Insert lame excuse here. But, I still want to talk and say whatever's coming through in my head. I've finished reading Thomas Paine's The Age of Reason. And for those of you who are atheists and in my audience, you'd love it. Because a lot of it is just a debunking of the New Testament, the Old Testament, and pointing out where the fallacies are, and basically all the rest of that kind of stuff that you guys just love anyway. So you can read it for that. I thought it was quite interesting that Thomas Paine drew a parallel between Deism and Quakerism, because apparently the Quakers regard the Bible as being a dead letter, or that's the phrase that he used, namely it's not living, it's not vibrant, it doesn't really have the Spirit of God in it, so to speak. But presumably, and I don't know enough about Quakerism, so essentially anything that I say at this present point in time, in this particular juncture, is just speculation and me talking completely out of my backside. One assumes that Quakers use the Bible for inspiration, but they don't necessarily actually believe in this 100%. And so, yeah, it's an interesting interpretation. Thomas Paine said that Deism is probably the first religion that's ever existed, and it'll be the last one that anyone ever believes in. Which I guess that's believable to a certain degree. What did early man think of the universe, or did early man have an animistic attitude to life, and did early man see spirits in everything? I think it's difficult to say because we are not in those times. All we've got is various relics or various representations, but a representation of something is not the thing itself. So if someone creates an image of an earth goddess, does that mean to say that they believe in a goddess of the earth, or is it just merely a concept of a one being or a divine singular source type thing, and they just chose to make an image of a really, really, really fat bitch by way of symbolism, and not actually believing that there is this really, really fat bitch that runs the whole universe? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it was a fascinating book. Thomas Paine was writing shortly after the French Revolution, so he was concerned at one point. He mentions that in The Age of Reason, that he himself might be killed like the aristocrats were. So it's rather brave of him to have actually set down his views, and where he was coming from, as far as religion is concerned, because obviously religion is a contentious issue at the best of times, and in an environment in which people are just killing people for political purposes, it's very difficult. There's a mention of the issue of church and state, and it may well have been Thomas Paine himself that put the idea of separation of church and state in the American Constitution. It might have been, I don't know, but he mentions that idea. So again, that's something else that makes me think that Thomas Paine was very important when it came to defining what America is, what America was, what America should be, and all of that. So, a very important book for its day. I would say a very brave book and courageous book for its time as well. Because in the late 1700s, do you really think that there were all that many people who were aggressively and vocally attacking the New and the Old Testament? Probably not. So it's totally revolutionary. His particular interpretation of why you should believe in God, I don't think that necessarily chimes with me. Presumably this is because I am in the 21st century, not the late 18th. And we've got more scientific advancement and all the rest of that, and we've all been educated to a much higher level than during those days. Or what? I mean, he gives the example of like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, and maybe that's got something to do with the idea of there being life afterwards. But he mentions the mind or the consciousness as being some kind of fine matter inside us, because you could take away your limbs, but you still got the sense of being, or the sense of presence and sense of existence. Or if you could hypothetically have like wings added to your back or any other appendages added, you would still have the same or similar perception of self. And this is part of his argument. And so the part of you which is like the consciousness is only a very small part of the whole body. He likens the human body to being like peach pulp rather than the kernel inside, which is also kind of interesting. So what is my final reflections on the book The Age of Reason? Some of the arguments I don't think quite held together. Some of the arguments for belief in God. But on the other hand, it was not written in a time of knowledge of psychology and knowledge of neuroscience and the importance of, I suppose, structure, inspiration, using some ideas to do yourself some good. I mean, he thought that belief in God and doing moral acts is religion. And I think I could go along with that. And it doesn't seem too outlandish. So yeah, I mean, it was an okay book. I personally can't believe the way that he does. Although there's an awful lot of correlations. And when he talks about revealed religion and speaking of ideas being passed on from one person to another, and the meaning getting changed and the books being re-edited and republished in different translations, and thus causing us to understand the message differently, is also important for people to remember. I mean, this is an issue that I've actually had with a lot of religious people, because they say things like, well, it's written here, this is the word of God, and all that kind of stuff. But the copy of the Bible that I've got is not the copy of the Bible that someone would have had 500 years ago. So how much of it has changed? How much has the word of God changed? Was God so weak that he would actually allow there to be human interpretation, if it is the literal word of God? No, it's been given that authority by people. One can gain inspiration from things. I mean, there was even the YouTube user Night Vision Phantom who talks about getting flashes of inspiration when he's reading the Bible, and he says that that's God talking to him. Well, why can't you get flashes of inspiration when you're reading nature, or when you're reading a work of fiction? Isn't that also God or some kind of other higher consciousness inside yourself talking to yourself? Talking to you? Yes, you might as well say that it is. Last night I went out to a witchcraft group. Yeah, I'm rather proud of it to a certain degree, because I saw much more deistic thinking amongst these people than I have amongst other people who are within the New Age movement. Okay, I did a bit of a faux pas at some point, and I interrupted an old guy when he was talking, and that went down really badly with him, not with anybody else, but just with him. So we had a little discussion afterwards, and we're going to do something to redress the power balance so this old guy starts feeling proud of himself again, because the subject of the conversation was astral projection. And I was the only person who actually read any books on it or had done any experimentation into it. So I'd suddenly become the man of the hour, And this old guy's been like a practicing occultist for years and years and years. Kind of like had his nose put out of joint by this like young interloper suddenly appearing out of nowhere, only going to like the second meeting, like ever. And all of a sudden, I'm like the essential person of the group. So there was all kinds of social tensions going on there, which was also interesting. But to the most part, I just see more deism in these people than I see devout witchcraft. In my early days of looking into the pagan groups, there was still definitely a wide variety of different people there, but they were much more dogmatic and much more aggressive in those days than they are now. So it would be interesting to see what happens in another 20 or 30 years once paganism has started to like chill out even more, or indeed by 2050, when there's been 100 years of Wicca in Britain, and whether it's actually sort of stopped being quite so silly and started to become a little more, I suppose, intuition and creativity driven, rather than, no, you must believe this, otherwise, ooh, terrible things are going to happen to you. Which is the way it was in my day when I was younger. So anyway, I don't want to bore you any further. You've got blog TV sessions to go to and people to fact to, or whatever it is you want to do. Anyway, great and glorious Nick Dutch signing out for now.